Hello everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah from Mormons. Today we're going to be doing chapter 31. It's a really short chapter. It's pretty straightforward. There appear to be comparatively few editing problems, although there's a little bit. Here as we get to the end of what scholars call Proto-Isaiah, where we start to have a lot of problems with the text. But it is going to get in some ways better, but also in some ways worse. It's going to get better in that there appear to be fewer of the small changes that we get here that make the text so garbled here as we've progressed, especially after the burdens of the nations last few chapters. But we are also going to get what appear to be slightly longer insertions. We'll talk about that later. People are taking the material Isaiah is writing about his own period and trying to apply it to their time after the Babylonian captivity. Now that's great to apply the scriptures to your own time. Book of Mormon guys do it all the time, but might have been nice if we had an older version that was not doing that. But you do what you got to do, and we'll just make this work. So chapter 31 is pretty short, but you have to remember that it's part of a pretty long speech, something that, once again, it's arranged thematically. Hard to know exactly where one speech starts and another one ends, especially because of editing problems. But it appears to go maybe from somewhere around 28 through perhaps 33 or thereabouts. Hard to say exactly how it's divided, but it's something like that. So this is the middle of a speech. So you have to remember, Isaiah's been talking about going down to Egypt for help. Why are you going to go get help from Egypt when you should really just be trying to get God to help you? Of course, God is going to be the one to help you, not Egypt. So he's been talking about the Assyrians, and God is going to destroy them as one might offer a sacrifice. They're going to be destroyed as a sacrifice is destroyed. That was the image we got at the end of the last chapter. So here we're getting something like that. He's been condemning them for getting help from Egypt, and now he's just continuing to do so here in this chapter. So it's pretty short, appears to have comparatively few textual issues. So let's just jump into it. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses and trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord. Yet he also is wise, and will bring evil, and will not call back his words, but he will arise against the house of the evildoers, and against the help of them that work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men, not God, and their horses flesh, and not spirit. The Lord shall stretch out his hand, both he that helpeth shall fall, and he that is holpen shall fall down, and they all shall fail together. For thus hath the Lord spoken unto me, like as the lion and the young lion roaring on his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him. He will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself for the noise of them. So shall the Lord of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion, and for the hill thereof. As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending also he will deliver it, and passing over he will preserve it. So that's just Isaiah 31, 1 through 5. Now this continues to run with the theme that we talked about last time. He says, woe to them that go down to Egypt for help. That was just what he was talking about in the last chapter. Why are you guys going to go down and get help from Egypt? You don't need Egypt, you need me. Right? That's what God is really saying to them. And so that's what we get here. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help and stay on horses and trust in chariots. Now it says stay on horses. That really means trust in horses and trust in chariots. Rely on horses and trust in chariots, we might say, today. Because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong. So you guys think you're going to go down to Egypt and that Egypt's horses and chariots are going to save you because they've got a whole bunch of them, and their horsemen are so great. That's not going to help you. You should look unto the Holy One of Israel, but you don't. They do not look unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord. Remember, Holy One of Israel has, in Isaiah's time, at least sometimes, it has a military implication. Definitely appears to be the case in this context. Don't get Egypt's help with your warfare. Get God's help to win your war. Yet he also is wise and will bring evil and will not call back his words. Now this is one part that does seem to be a little bit garbled, but it's not too bad. I think the idea is God is wise. He will bring evil upon the wicked, and he will not call back his words. He will bring evil on the wicked, and he will just do what he always has said he's going to do, which is support the righteous and punish the wicked. But will arise against the house of evildoers and against the help of them that work iniquity. So he's going to rise against everyone who does evil. And it says, against the help of them that work iniquity. It might be better to translate that as he's going to actually work against those that work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men and not God, and their horses flesh and not spirit. When the Lord shall stretch out his hand, both he that helpeth shall fall, and he that is holpen shall fall down, and they all shall fail together. Now, this is a little bit garbled also, but it's not too bad, like I said. So the first part is clear. Now the Egyptians are men and not God. That's his point. Why are you going to trust men to help you when you've got me? Their horses are flesh and not spirit. These guys would probably be familiar with the stories about guys like Elijah and Elisha, where you actually see God's sort of chariot coming to help Israel. That's something they would probably be familiar with at this time. So when he says that, this is the image that's probably brought to mind, this idea of these celestial chariots and horsemen coming to help the Israelites. So he says, "When the Lord shall stretch out his hand, both he that helpeth shall fail, and he that is holpen shall fall down. They all shall fail together." In other words, you're going to turn to Egypt to help you instead of me? When I stretch out my hand, no amount of allies that the Assyrians have been able to accumulate is possibly going to help them. He that helpeth shall fall, and he that is holpen, or rather he that is helped, shall fall down. They shall all fail together. The Assyrians and their allies are all going to fail because I'm going to make sure they fail personally. The Egyptians can't give you that kind of a guarantee. The Egyptians can't give you that kind of help. Only I can give you that kind of help. For thus hath the Lord spoken unto me, like as the lion and the young lion, roaring on his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him, he will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself from the noise of them. So shall the Lord of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion, and for the hill thereof. So this is a specific prophecy about what's going to happen with the Assyrians. So he says, just like a lion, he says the lion and the young lion, God has told them exactly what's going to happen. Thus hath the Lord spoken unto me. Like the lion and the young lion roaring on his prey when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him. So this is the idea of when you have lions, they go hunting, they capture their prey, and then afterwards they roar to scare all the other animals away from them and say, I'm eating this right now, I caught it, don't bother me while I'm eating. So that's the idea that we get here. It says, like as a lion and young lion roaring on his prey when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him. So it's going to be like a couple lions eating this animal that they've caught while shepherds are out trying to go deal with the lion. Well, the shepherds are not going to fare very well against a couple of lions. And so when the shepherds are called forth against him, the lions aren't going to be afraid of the shepherds. He's not going to be scared and run away, abase himself for the noise of them. So that's what we get, the image that is painted here. Like as the lion and young lion roaring on his prey when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him, he will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself for the noise of them. In other words, God is saying, I don't care how many enemies are called against me. I don't care how many allies the Assyrians have. It's going to be like a bunch of little silly shepherds trying to fight a lion. It's not really going to work out. So shall the Lord of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion and for the hill thereof, he says. The Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, is going to come down and fight for Mount Zion. Now, Mount Zion is the area where the temple is, and it's probably also close to where the palace is, probably kind of this combined complex. So for Mount Zion and for the hill thereof. So once again, we get the parallelism. He's going to come down, he's going to fight to defend Jerusalem. And the hill thereof may be a slight expansion. For Mount Zion, specifically the temple and palace complex, and for the hill thereof, Jerusalem itself. And so that's what we get in the next verse, verse 5. As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending also he will deliver it, and passing over he will preserve it. Because you got to remember, this is what happens. The Assyrians come, they attack Jerusalem. God defends Jerusalem by wiping out a huge number of Assyrians. Jerusalem is really the only one left that doesn't have major damage done to it, one of the only ones. But Jerusalem is at least spared. And so that's what he's talking about here. And he's going to say, and he says, as birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. I'm not completely sure what this means exactly. I wonder if it really should be as birds flying. It could be as birds spread out their wings. That might be the idea. Just as, and we get this in the New Testament, just as birds shelter their young under their wings to protect it from predators, it could be that he's going to defend Jerusalem as though he were spreading his wings over it. The Lord of hosts will defend Jerusalem. Defending also he will deliver it. So he's going to defend it and save it, and passing over he will preserve it. So that doesn't necessarily mean flying, passing over. It could mean he's going to pass over it with his wings. He's going to put his wings over it, is another possible translation there. So this idea of giving this protective covering to Jerusalem. So he's going to defend Jerusalem as a bird defends its young. And once again, it could be that Jesus alludes to this very verse in the New Testament when he talks about that, and also in the Book of Mormon. Hard to say, but that is a distinct possibility. So this really is exactly what happens. God really does defend Jerusalem like this in a miraculous way. And so he says, Egypt's not going to help you. If anybody's going to help you, it's going to be me. So in 6 it says, turn ye unto him from whom the children of Israel have deeply revolted. For in that day every man shall cast away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which your own hands have made unto you for a sin. Then shall the Assyrian fall with the sword not of a mighty man, and the sword not of a mean man shall devour him. But he shall flee from the sword, and his young men shall be discomfited. And he shall pass over to his stronghold for fear, and his princes shall be afraid of the Ensign, saith the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and his furnace in Jerusalem. So here he says, turn ye unto him from whom the children of Israel have deeply revolted. In other words, go back to God. Turn back to me. You guys have rebelled against me, God is saying. Come back to me. So that's what Isaiah is encouraging them to do. Go back to God. For in that day, when you do, everyone, every man, every person will cast away their idols of silver and idols of gold which your own hands have made unto you for a sin. Now remember, we talked about this earlier. You're going to throw away your idols. You're going to realize that God is the only one that can save you and that these idols cannot. That's key. Now, he's talking here about idolatry, about them casting away their idols. As he's been continuously condemning idols this whole time. And he's going to continue to do so. He's going to have to turn up the heat a little bit after the Assyrians win. But we see this beginning here. You guys are going to throw away your idols that you've had. And your idols have been sin to you, and you are going to finally now throw them away. And he says, in that day, everyone's going to do this. Presumably, when God saves you, you'll realize that he was the one that saved you, and then you will get rid of your idols. Then shall the Assyrian fall with the sword, not of a mighty man, and the sword not of a mean man shall devour him. He shall flee from the sword, and his young men shall be discomfited. So the Assyrian shall fall with the sword, not of a mighty man. In other words, not of man at all. Man is not going to be the one to kill the Assyrians. God is going to kill the Assyrians. And so it says, the sword not of a mean man shall devour him. Regular men, not strong men, not the army, not mean men, which is to say just kind of regular people. No human is going to kill these guys. He will flee from the sword, and his young men shall be discomfited. Now, this could mean a couple of things. he shall flee from the sword. In other words, God is going to come and wipe a lot of them out, and then they're going to flee, which happens. But it could also be that you won't even need the army to actually do anything at all. Yes, the Egyptians are going to show up, which they do appear to at least threaten to show up. It's kind of the 1-2 punch that we talked about before. He appears to be alluding to this here. That God comes in, he kills a whole bunch of Assyrians, presumably with a plague. We'll talk about that in just a few chapters. Then everybody gets up and runs away. Why? Because they're afraid that the Nubians down south in Egypt are going to realize that they're weak, that they've lost a huge number of men, and they're going to come up and finish them off. So he will flee from the sword, either the sword of the Lord after God has killed them all, or the potential sword of the Nubians, which may or may not be coming. And his young men shall be discomfited. Now that word discomfited there is kind of a funny word. In Hebrew, really it just means that they're going to be burdened, or perhaps even enslaved, but the idea appears to be burdened in this particular case. Burdened as in they're going to get this plague that God's going to send upon them. So everybody's going to be consumed by this, and the rest are going to run home. And he shall pass over to his stronghold for fear. Remember, this is exactly what what does happen. They get punished by the Lord, as it were. They lose a lot of men, and then they run away. They pass over to his stronghold. They run back to their more central part of the Assyrian Empire because they're afraid of the Nubians. And his princes shall be afraid of the ensign, saith the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and his furnace in Jerusalem. So they're afraid not only of the Nubians, but what if Jehovah, this warrior God, decides to do something else for them? Afraid of the ensign, saith the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and his furnace is in Jerusalem. It could be, in this case, at the ensign, because it's a signal. That's really what ensign means when you look at it in Hebrew. So it could be that he's afraid of the Lord, specifically. Whatever sign of the Lord, I'm not sure what exactly that is, could be literally be an ensign or a flag, but the word could imply also that there's some kind of beacon fire that they're seeing. Either way, they're going to be afraid of this. They're going to run home to the heart of the Assyrian Empire. So he says, his princes shall be afraid of the ensign, saith the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and his furnace in Jerusalem. Now remember, we just talked about this in the last chapter. This idea of God sort of lighting this fire on all these sacrifices at the temple, and God making his own sacrifice. They were going to do it for Molech, but God saying, nope, I'm going to do the sacrifice. And so he says he's running with that idea, whose fire is in Zion and his furnace is in Jerusalem. So he's here, the temple is there, his altar is there. The implication almost is the altar doesn't even have to quit burning. Well, the Assyrians go through all this destruction, they're still offering sacrifices. And everyone knows that Jehovah's the one that lives there in Jerusalem at the temple. And people are going to be afraid now because they've seen what God can do. And I think that's really the point of this very short chapter. God is the one that's going to take care of you. This is the constant theme of Isaiah. We continue to run into this over and over again. We'll continue to run into it for the rest of the book. People try to get help from all these other sources, from their pagan gods, their idols, or from the Egyptians. We continuously do that. We try to get help from other sources, and God says, don't do that. I'm going to help you. Don't try to get help from people that can't help you. I'm the one that's really going to save you. And I think that's really what we get here. And I think that's what we have to remember. I think that's what Isaiah is really trying to say to us here. He can protect us. He can defend us. And he's the one that we have to turn to. So anyway, that's a very short 9 verses. So that was Isaiah 31. We're going to move on to in more detail really talk about what we were just talking about. We're just going to continue with this. Like I said, it seems to be a fairly long speech that Isaiah is giving. But we're almost done with what they call Proto-Isaiah. So what we call Deutero-Isaiah, which honestly is not really a very good division point, but I'll take it, is coming pretty soon. And like I said, I don't think it's a very good division point. We'll see that actually what people usually consider Proto and Deutero Isaiah is split in almost in the middle of a sentence. So we're going to look at that and talk about it. We're getting to the end of what's called Proto Isaiah, the first part of Isaiah, which means that in some ways, like I said earlier, we're a little bit out of the woods, or we're going to be out of the woods as far as textual corruption goes. There is later a lot of textual corruption, but it's easier to see, in my opinion. So we're kind of getting to the end of some of this stuff, which is good. But anyway, that's it for today. We're going to do a little bit of Messianic stuff later, so we will see you guys next time.